Chapter 4. Pure Being. Of all essences, the most lauded and the most despised, the most intently studied in some quarters and the most misunderstood in others, is pure being. It has been identified with nothing, with matter, and with God, and even among those who regard it in its logical purity, it is sometimes said to be the richest and the most comprehensive of essences, and sometimes the poorest and most abstract. No essence, as we have seen, is abstract essentially, since it defines itself and might appear alone to an intellect strung to that key. And in the case of pure being, we have high testimony, which there is no reason to distrust, assuring us that, in fact, it appears alone to the human intellect in its ultimate reaches, and even when not realized separately in intuition, it can be discerned both analytically and intuitively in every essence whatsoever. Pure being supplies, as it were, the logical or aesthetic matter which all essences have in common, and which reduces them to comparable modes on one plane of reality. Pure being is thus found in all essences, somewhat as light is in all colors, or life in all feeling and thought. And philosophers like Parmenides and Spinoza, not to speak here of the Indians, assure us that we always have an adequate intuition of this pure being, usually buried under vain illusions, but when unearthed and isolated, seen to be very mighty in itself and easily recognizable. Nevertheless, such assurances may mean little to other mortals. Language at these depths of attentiveness is perforce the language of solitaries. When repeated, it may not carry with it the intuition which it was first meant to record. The very logicians who distinguish this essence, because they call it being, may conclude that nothing else can be. The most perplexing inference, and in view of the many meanings of the word is, the most misleading one, while other logicians, because pure being is different from all other essences, may hastily identify it with nothing, by a strange equivocation between nothing and nothing else. Confusion in this matter comes chiefly from the equivocation between being and existence. Initially, this equivocation is normal, innocent, and even expedient, like any substitution of names for things. It is only when defended theoretically that it becomes perverse. Intelligence begins with it. Animals are surrounded by things that affect their condition and prompt their reactions, so that their attention is necessarily intent upon existing things. Yet the intellectual transcript of their condition, in that agony of attention, is only some intuited essence, some sensuous or logical term, which, being their sole description for the object before them, they take to be that object itself in its whole existing nature. So individual forms of being stand in discourse for particular things, but sometimes rather than some specific thing, a certain equilibrium of influences absorbs attention. A noon pause comes in our labor, and more special sensations being fused and blurred, we endure dull strain and duration without diversity, a vast, strange feeling. We return then, as it were, to the sleep preceding life, to the peace of the womb. There is vitality without urgency, pressure without light, potential movement without object or express direction. Such, we may fancy, might be the inner sense of matter. Perhaps some forms of animal or vegetable life never yield any other experience. A vague world is posited as existing for an expectation and intent, as in memory and the sense of movement. There is a tacit assumption of things removed, threatening, eventual, as yet unknown. There is accordingly nothing pure in this sense of existence, simple or vague as its deliverance may seem, for this vagueness and simplicity are uneasy. The peace of the womb is precarious. It is but a muffled and initial phase of distraction, confusion, hope, and fear. Care fills its heart as it does our dreams, and we might identify it with the universal will of German transcendentalism, vaguely pregnant with worlds and worlds. But slumber is not contemplation, and the buzz of matter is not the beatific vision. The pleasure, if pleasure be found in it, is that of original sin. The father of lies is whispering in that paradise. The intuition of pure being looks in the opposite direction. In order to reach it, attention would need to abandon all concern for transitions, events, ulterior or external facts, and to concentrate all its light on the positive intrinsic nature of the present datum. Nor would that suffice, but from this special essence it would need to pass to the inner essence of all those alien half-known things, all those absent times and eventual passions which animal faith may posit, or fancy may conceive, since pure being resides in them all equally, no less than in the here and now. The force of insight would thus have to vanquish all will and transcend all animal limitations, cancelling every fear, preference, or private perspective which a station now and here would involve. In other words, in order to reach the intuition of pure being, it is requisite to rise altogether above the sense of existence. The reason for this lies in the very nature of existence, which is flux and, as Plato would say, non-being. The more truly existence is felt, therefore, the less possible it is to concentrate attention on anything, and to say, existence is this. He is closest to existence, and most at its heart, who lives on the wing, intent always on the not given, and even when the present fact is atrociously absorbing, as in pain, the sense of existence remains empty essentially and indescribable by the very force and distraction of its presence. If we are asked to describe it, we are reduced to naming the circumstances or using some metaphor. And if in the midst of it we pause to consider the internal character of that which we feel, raising it thereby for the first time to distinct intuition, the distraction, the belief, the assurance of existence which filled us before have ipso facto disappeared. Some image, some word, some finely shaded sensible essence alone is felt. In other words, the proper nature of existence is distraction itself, transition at least virtual, so that it cannot be synthesized in intuition without being sublimated into a picture of itself, and washed clean of its contradiction and urgency. The relations which were external from the station of each of the parts as it arose separately, now become internal to the system of the whole, and the intuition in which this whole is synthesized drops the flux of existence in order to retain only its form and the truth about it. If, then, being and existence seem in common parlance almost interchangeable terms, It is only so long as their respective objects are merely named or designated from the outside. When they are conceived positively and at close quarters, they turn out to be exact opposites. Existence exists by virtue of oppositions in the place, time, and exclusive characters of particulars. Being has being by virtue of its universal identity. This is true of the being of each individual essence, and it is true preeminently of pure being. Its identity is omnipresent and internal everywhere. It equalizes those centers of existence which, in their single blindness, become nests for external relations. It makes all time simultaneous, and by excluding change, renders existence, from its point of view, inconceivable. Moreover, in reducing all things and all external relations to their internal being, that is, to their essences, it transports them into a realm of being which is necessarily infinite, in which their presence, therefore, is no temporary accident, as is their existence in the world, so that the existent becomes continuous with the non-existent, and neither more nor less real than any other eternal essence. This contrast between being and existence is indicated by calling being pure. Pure is an epithet proper to all essences. Objects become pure when intuition permeates them and rests in them without the intervention of any ulterior intent or cross lights, as we speak of pure mathematics or pure pleasure. Purity of this sort is no thinness of form, but the perfection of it. It admits any amount of detail if it is all overt and clear on the plane of actuality and not latent. In this acceptation of the word pure, pure being is no purer than any other essence, but all are pure in so far as they are considered in their proper character, freed from the irrelevancies that may encumber them when they figure for a moment in some material world or in some laboring mind. It would therefore be useless and redundant habitually to speak of pure being if nothing were meant save that being is an essence. What is indicated is that pure being is related to other essences very much as any essence is related to its existing manifestations. For whereas any special essence, such as color or sound, sky blue or B flat, is exclusive and definable by contrast, pure being is present in them all, somewhat as space is in all geometrical figures, at once permeating and transcending each of them. For this essence, if not fertile casually as facts are fertile, is in its own way infinitely pregnant. The nature of pure being anywhere implies the whole realm of essence, since being could not possess its full extension if any sort of being were forbidden to be. That pure being, in this sphere of essence, should have this simple, intense, and pervasive sort of reality provokes afresh in the minds of dialecticians that tendency to identify essence with existence which is native to the animal mind. For in the natural world, too, there seems to be an omnipresent, simple, intensely real something which dwells in particular things, is transmitted from one to another, and compels them to arise in their infinite variety and endless succession. This omnipresent something is called substance. Might not then pure being, which lies in all essences and therefore also in all existing things, be the substance of these things, and the universal internal cause of their existence? This is a suggestion which has worked powerfully in the thoughts of those metaphysicians, like the Eleatics, whose physics has been dominated by dialectic. Nor is the suggestion altogether false. That something exists, that there is a world, is very true. Also, that whatever else this world may be, it is substantial, that is, exists in itself independently of all report or opinion. The hypostasis of being into substance is therefore no error, but a first awakening of curiosity and belief, which in so far as it posits the existence of something, errs only by its extreme inadequacy. It honestly sets about using the category of substance, but without any notion of what, in detail, this substance is. This inadequacy itself is inevitable. How should animals in the womb, or just out of it, conceive truly that constitution of the world which is not disentangled even today by science or philosophy? Positive error only appears when this natural inadequacy of our ideas is denied, and when mere being is deputed to reveal the whole substance and complete reality of things. The belief in substance, which should have been the beginning of art and science, then suddenly makes an end of them. For if there were truly nothing in nature or in experience except mere being, all events and appearances would be sheer illusions, since in reality they would be all identical. I shall return to this subject in considering the properties requisite in any substance fit to subtend appearances and the life of nature. Such a substance must be unequally distributed and in motion. Its proper name is matter. Here I will only notice in passing how the notion of pure being is likely to be contaminated in the effort to identify it with substance. Pure being, as is indicated by calling it infinite and eternal, if we ponder these epithets, is utterly absolved from all subservience to contingent facts and to the momentary casual forms of human experience. It is the most immaterial, untamable, inexhaustible of essences. Yet Parmenides, no tyro in dialectic, denied that it was infinite, because it had to give body to an existing spherical cosmos. And indeed, apart from ancient astronomy, existence always involves a certain concentration and contrast with what is not, and thereby excludes infinity. Again, we find Spinoza asserting that the entire nature of being, which he actually calls substance, must be manifested in existence, and that all these manifestations must be parallel to the forms of the material world, of which indeed those other manifestations can be only complementary aspects, by a chance unknown to us. Here in the cosmic frog, prodigiously swollen in rivalry with the ontological ox, but the ox, lest that ambition should seem too absurd, is accommodated to the frog nature, and pure being is thought of as a sort of matter or force resident in natural things, and lending them their existence, enriching them with an infinite number of attributes which they hide from view. On the one hand, then, if pure being is substance, existence must be illusion, and on the other hand, pure being must be not the infinite essence which it is, but hard kernel for existence. Hence, the seesaw in the views of those metaphysicians who hypostasize pure being. Sometimes their substance annuls all particulars, and sometimes it supports them. Pure being excludes particular determinations within its own bosom, but it does not annul them in the world, because it is not on the plane of existence at all. It is by no means a matter within particulars which lends them existence. Substance, on the other hand, is such a matter, and by its movements and redistribution, it gives rise in turn to every fact and relation in the natural world. Were pure being an existing substance, nothing else could exist or arise, not even the occasional intuition of pure being. All that exists by being other than pure being, under circumstances which themselves are particular and contingent. And if substance were not contingent, unequally distributed, and in motion, it would evidently not be the ground of any event or of any actual appearance. Thus, the hypostasis of pure being, after being fatal to the reality of all facts, is fatal to respect for pure being itself, because considered as a substance, it would be useless, unknowable, and nowhere to be found. Pure being, although a supreme degree of detachment and concentration be requisite to conceive it adequately, is, like any other essence, perfectly open to intuition. Its sublimity is not obscurity, and it is excluded from knowledge only in the sense in which any immediate object, being an object of intuition, need not and should not be posited as a removed existence by the transitive and precarious sort of knowledge by which facts may be known. But pure being hypostasized into substance is a metaphysical spectre. Matter congealed, arrested, emptied, and deprived of its cosmic fertility. Pure being conceived as a substance or an existence might indeed almost justify the well-known gibe that pure being and pure nothing are identical. This sophism is complementary to those misunderstandings. The same misplaced preoccupation with physics has ended in impatience of logic and of honest intent. Of pure being, which is not a romantic object, the moderns have little experience. The idea of nothing is easier and far more familiar to them. We all know the feeling of contrast and disappointment which comes over the senses when they are robbed of their habitual entertainment, as, for instance, the sensation of darkness when the lights suddenly go out. The psyche, continuing to live her incessant life, feels cheated of her food and bereft of her employment. This is perhaps the origin of that horror of non-existence which afflicts so many mortals, a horror which would be evidently objectless and impossible if really nothing existed, and the poor wights were not there to shiver in the cold. WIGHTS. But the psyche, feeling or imagining the sudden disappearance of her supports, finds her own existence empty and abortive. She does not know where to turn or what to expect, and this anguish is her acquaintance with nothingness. For experience, then, nothing means a void caused by the absence of some expected thing, The fact that such a thing fails to exist is logically dependent on the reality of its form of being, its designated and recognizable essence, and the sense that there is nothing there is dependent for its existence on a psyche missing some particular thing and feeling a specific emptiness.